Live, ladies and gentlemen. You once again welcome to the King Dems podcast. And today I have with me not a fighter, but a fighter in life. Big welcome, Rebecca Gorek. Rebecca Gorek is a CFS coach, and we are in for an educative session. How are you, Rebecca? Wow. For the first time in my life, I'm learning about CFS, and the ME is quite a mouthful. So, like you said, they're pretty much the same thing, but the ME, let me give it another attempt, right? So it's myalgic encephalomyelitis. I hope I did justice to that, right? So basically, your Instagram bio says that you healed from CFS, which is chronic fatigue syndrome. So can you share your personal journey, how it all started, and what inspired you to become a FasterEFT coach?
I think first of all, I could say that I have a little baby down here, so that's why I might be looking down. You already know that, but for everybody else, well, when I was a teenager, I struggled with just getting more and more stressed and more tired, but nothing out of the ordinary, kind of just what everybody else is experiencing. So I didn't really do anything. I didn't put much thought into it. It was just a normal teenager that was a bit stressed and often sick and, nothing major. And then in high school, it just got worse and worse and worse. And I was like the type A personality, always pushing myself, always forcing, getting the good grades, doing everything to perfection. You kind of got the idea now that I'm not a perfectionist anymore. I've learned to let that go. You can see that on my background here.
Especially when you have kids,
Yes. Yes.
Two things.
Yeah.
When you have kids or when you have a busy schedule. Because I remember there's a friend of mine who used to say, oh, he's got OCD. But there was a time when we had this really busy schedule. He said it's like his OCD fled.
Yeah.
So I can very much relate, when you have kids and, when you've got a busy schedule, these things happen. Yeah. So you were at the point where you were talking about your high school experience.
Oh, no, that's happening. Yeah, so I was just lagging a little bit. You're back now. I don't know if it was me or you. I hope it's not me. My computer is down.
It's not me. It goes in for a second, but then I guess it's back.
Yeah, it's back. I didn't hear the question, but should I just continue?
No, I wanted you to continue. I said I think you dropped off. I interrupted you when you were talking about your high school experience, right? Okay, yes.
Yeah, so basically, like everything just got worse and worse. I had like a few, you could say, traumatic, nothing major, but like a boyfriend broke up with me, my grandfather died, just like the regular traumatic stuff, And then after high school, I was just, I remember trying to do my exams and I did everything. I finished it and I finished it great, of course, because that's who I was. But I had so much pain in my neck. I had headaches every day. I was trembling because I was so stressed and just worn out. And I had made sure I had a job 2 weeks after I finished. A job that I would say is quite demanding for a teenager. I was working in the home care, so driving around in a car and taking care of elderly people.
That's tough.
Yeah, it was not the best choice.
Yeah, but it's still a service to humanity. I very, very much appreciate carers, healthcare workers. I feel like they are overworked and underpaid.
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't get much training. I was just kind of thrown into it. So doing that while you're severely stressed was not good, and of course it made everything worse. And then I ended up quitting because I just couldn't do it anymore. But then, I quit a Friday and I had a new job Monday.
Wow,
so I was still not listening. I was still not taking it seriously. And then that was a job in a kindergarten, which I really loved. But after half a year, I couldn't anymore. I could barely walk. I could barely function. I could barely sleep. I couldn't do anything. So I remember the time I decided, okay, this is enough. I was awake at 4 a.m. and I was so stressed about having to go to kindergarten to work that I couldn't sleep. And I was supposed to get up at 6. So that was 2 hours of sleep because I was so stressed. So I quit that day. And that's when, you know what, I'm just going to give the baby away because there's a lot of noises.
Okay, we had to press and we're right back. Yes, there we go.
Yes.
Back again.
So where was I? Yeah, I was just so bad at that point, and I kind of crashed completely after that. So that's around like that time was like my worst year. So if I walked more than 500 meters, I would crash. So 500 to 700 meters were my normal daily walk, and I would have to. I was walking on this field behind my house, and I would have to lay down halfway just to rest to be able to get back. And if I walked too fast, my heart would beat and I would feel so bad. So it was a super slow walk. If I walked 100 meters more, I would crash. So I had to be so careful and so aware constantly not to overdo it. I couldn't watch a movie. That would get me, like, my body would get too stressed. I couldn't read. I couldn't hold a conversation for more than, like, on a good day, I could a couple of hours, but that was maximum. Like, I couldn't socialize for a whole day or anything. So I didn't really see anybody for a whole year, only really my parents and my brother. And I lived at home at this time, which was really good because, I think I was pretty lucky. I still lived at home. I didn't have a family yet and all these things. So my mom could help me out. I didn't have to think about making dinner and these things because I couldn't really take care of myself at that point.
That is actually very, very tough. Living with our CFS can be incredibly isolated. But what was the turning point for you when you realized you could regain control over your health?
Yeah. So for me, it kind of had to get so bad that I would finally kick into action. And that's something I think a lot of people experience, that things sometimes have to get really, really bad before you finally are ready to do something about it. And for me, I had started seeing this psychologist to kind of deal with some of the stress and so on. And she told me I had a depression. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? On top of everything else, I also have a depression. And that was like the turning point. I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I gotta heal. I gotta get out of this. And at that point, of course, I had no idea how. I didn't really believe that it was possible, but I knew I was really, really, really stubborn. So I knew that if I decided that I was going to heal, then it would happen, even though I didn't know how or when or anything. And it was a journey. In the beginning, I dabbled more in like trying to eat differently and kind of I knew that doctors were not an option because I had been there and there were no treatment that didn't exist.
Doctors can be annoying sometimes.
Yeah. So there's my first kind of stop on like my kind of alternative journey was food, like changing my diet. It did not really do much, maybe a little bit, but I think honestly, if I had done nothing, I probably didn't make much of a difference, but it gave me hope, and I started to kind of take responsibility and figure out what worked and what didn't. And then when it actually started to shift was when I began to look within and started to look at the emotional and mental aspect of it and started to kind of clear out some of those patterns behind maybe why I ended there in the first place. And that's when the ball started rolling and I actually started to get better.
So many people actually struggle with burnout and anxiety in silence. A lot of people do not speak up. So, what gave you the courage, not only to heal, but also help other people on their own journeys to recovery?
I think I was just so excited about it, actually. It wasn't, I mean, I can't really say like I'm a great person, I just wanted to help others. That's actually not really how it was. I was just so excited about it that I couldn't help but sharing about it. And I think because I was sharing so authentically, people kind of resonated with it. I mean, I don't have a huge following or anything, but I have helped quite a few people. And yeah, I think it was just my excitement that other people could feel and see.
Interesting. You touched a bit on, being authentic. And I remember before the pod, I did tell you that I am the most authentic human being walking the face of this planet. So you would have to take a cue behind me in terms of being authentic. So talking about the power of faster EFT. So for the listeners, for the viewers who may not be familiar with what exactly faster EFT is and how does it differ from traditional EFT, that is emotional freedom techniques. So can you please shed some light on that?
Yeah, sure. As I've understood it, there's quite a big difference, but of course it is in the same field of kind of alternative modalities. EFT is more about just releasing like stuck emotions, and that's kind of the extent of it. And you tap while you do it. With fast AFT, there's a lot of other things kind of intertwined, like hypnotherapy, and like the main thing is you work on memories. With EFT, I don't think you do it the same way, at least. To be honest, I've never really tried EFT, but I have heard a lot of people, in the fast EFT world, heard about them trying it or have had clients who maybe didn't really get better with the EFT. Of course, some people do. But the difference is that fast EFT, it addresses the patterns you have built based on the memories you've had. And it sounds very complicated. It's not. Like, let's
Patterns
say,
you have built based on the memories that you have, right?
yes, yes. So,
Okay.
like, for instance, if you grew up in a family and it's very unsafe, your dad is violent, for instance, then that feels unsafe. And then even when you move out, you might still feel unsafe because you grew up with that and you have the memories, the experiences in your baggage. And then fast AFT can go in and help you clear that out so you no longer react as if you were back there.
Wow. So I would like to bring in my own self, my own personal experiences into this equation and this conversation we're having. So you talking about safety reminded me of some girl I was dating a few years back. And I asked her a question at the time, like, what would you say you like about me, or how do you feel around me? And then she said something that I least expected. She said, what I like the most about you is that I feel safe around you. Well, safe. Safety is safety like a thing, but then over time I got to know that, oh, she probably had previous issues with domestic violence. So you creating an atmosphere wherein a person feels safe is very much appreciated by that kind of individual,
Mm,
which
yeah.
you, who probably has not had to struggle with that kind of challenge, would probably take for granted or not very much appreciate. Once you go through certain challenges and you're now put in an environment wherein that challenge seems to be non-existent, you would appreciate that environment very much. And that's what I realized. But for me, recently, I discovered that certain smells actually, would I say, provoke certain emotions from
Yeah.
me. So I remember there's this particular smell of grass. And I remember when I was, I think probably in like primary school or something, we used to go play during the breaks or after school. And there was this smell of grass, especially after it rained. So it kind of made me associate that smell with the school that I
Yeah.
went to at the time. And I did not like really like that school. So even now, anytime I smell that grass smell, I kind of feel, would I say, irritated, angry, agitated, like you're on defense
Oh,
mode, like what's happening? You
yeah.
get it? Because I did not like that particular school environment.
Mm,
But at some point I had to do some personal reflection, like because I love to connect with nature. Like this grass, you're no longer in that school. Like I have to think like why don't you like this particular smell? Because it reminds me of that particular school. And until I was able to now identify, the cause of the effect, right? So as well, certain perfumes as well remind me of certain places. So I smell certain perfumes and they probably remind me of certain individuals that I like, and it makes me happy. But if I smell a perfume that makes me remember somebody that I dislike, I just get irritated. I'm like, no, no, no. Whoever it is that like you just feel a certain type of way, even if it's a different individual wearing the same scent, wearing the
yeah.
same fragrance.
Yeah.
So like you talking about how these, modern technique or alternative modalities, alternative medicine, can help people clear out, the baggage of the past. So take me as your patient now. So how can I use, faster EFT to help clear out, certain, how would I say, traumas, certain traumas from the past in order to be able to achieve, wellness for the future.
Yeah, your example is a quite easy one. So you already gave me the answer. If we take the grass example, that would be that you have some school experiences that reminded you of school. So if I
Yeah,
was
because
working,
back in Nigeria, the teachers used to beat us in school. So you don't want to go back to those days where the teachers are always beating you for no any slight reason.
well,
So yeah, that's quite traumatic.
luckily it's different here. Yeah. So if I was working with a client on that, I would first map out um, kind of like the problems behind it. So like I said, it was easy because you kind of gave the answer already. You already consciously know, okay, this is connected to um, school. And then, if I was really in a session, then I would try to make other connections. Like, okay, why did it bother you so much? Did your father also hit you, or did your like where have you experienced this elsewhere? When did it start? What symptoms did you have when this happened? And so on and so on. And then when I have mapped that out, then I would start to use the technique. The tapping is the main tool we use, but I could also do this without even tapping because it's not
But
actually about the
tapping.
tapping. Yeah.
So
So
how does the tapping work?
yeah. So if you were my client, I would say, okay, go back to your school experience. Maybe don't do it too much right now. I don't want you to get all emotional, but
Let's go, let's go, let's go. Now we get emotional.
okay, we can do it. We can do it.
Okay.
So then go back to your school experience and notice how it feels when your teacher is beating you. Notice how that little child feels being beaten up every day in school, having to face these teachers, all the bad stuff, all the emotions connected to it. Go back there and notice it. Maybe you can see the teachers, maybe you can feel it physically, whatever it is for you. And when you really got that, yeah, you in touch with it now? Yeah, good job. Then just copy me and tap between your eyebrows like this. Yeah, and say, I let it go. And while you do this, just focus on your fingers. Forget about the memory for a sec. Look at me. Focus on your fingers and just say, I let it go. Keep tapping. And then tap beside your eyes. I let it go. Under the eyes. It's safe to let it go. This is fun. On the collarbones. I let it go. And take a deep breath in. Okay, and just shake your hands a little bit. Move your body a little bit. You're a physical person. I could imagine because you're into UFC. So yeah,
Yeah.
move your body a little bit. Get back into the present. Yes, exactly. Okay. So that process right there where we go back to the feelings and then I try to snap you out while we tap. I might say something silly. Sometimes I'm not great at cracking jokes, but I try. I do my best. And I basically pull you out of that state and get you back to the present. I can see you might still be a little affected. And then
Hmm.
now what we do is I want you to think about a happy memory. So something that makes you feel great. Could be a real memory or just something you make up. It doesn't really matter.
Not from school or from like
No,
any
just your
other.
life. Just a good memory.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so I want you to just grab your wrist. It doesn't matter which one. Just hold your wrist. And then go back to that memory and feel the happy emotions and everything connected to it. And try to be in your body in that memory and really experience it like it's happening right now. Notice the good emotions, the good things you can see, feel, everything. Yes, good job. And take a deep breath in and say peace. Yes. So now you feel better, right? Right now in this second, you feel good.
Yeah, like it feels like, I think I lack the words to explain the soothing feeling. Yeah, you feel relaxed, you feel at peace, you feel like certain weights are lifted up
Yeah,
off your shoulders.
exactly.
So you
The
just
thing is,
feel
hmm?
free.
Yeah. So the thing is, just the same way as our kind of negative, I do this because nothing is really negative, but the same way our negative experiences have the power to create certain symptoms in our body or create some havoc, then our positive, again,
Mm.
positive memories also have that. So we basically just use that to kind of collapse anything we don't want in there. So I made you go back to the negative memory. Then I distracted you by tapping and talking to you and making you move. and getting you back to the present. And then I made you go to your happy memory. And that process is like the basic of what we do in a session. So then now if I ask you, okay, go back again and notice, how does it feel now? Is it better? Has it changed? Then maybe you can say if it feels different when you go back to that school experience. It might take a little bit more time, but
Yeah, but after going to the happy experience, I actually, how would I say, noticed this like internal peace and joy. Yeah, coming from within. But there was a funny experience I wanted to share from the school experience. I think when I went back to that experience, I just remembered there was a day I did skip school because I think my class were being punished for something that we did. And I remember you told me to remember the teachers, right? And I don't know if anybody got to know about this or if I ever got to tell my parents. So there was this teacher that used to like to just, beat us with, they usually have this sticks, this wooden sticks called canes, right? So
yeah.
he used to kid us. And I think we were just like having fun in one abandoned classroom playing football. And then he came to start flogging us. And guess what? All the boys ganged up against the teacher. I was fighting the guy. So it was like, and me, I didn't want to get involved, but I think he spotted me amongst the people who were playing the football in that place. And, like you rightly said, I'm very much, a sports person. I used to use my pocket money to buy football magazines, football newspapers every morning. And, I'll go to the newspaper stands, spark up an argument about, different soccer teams. And when people start getting into a heated argument, I just run off to school. So the memory I remembered was those boys revolting against the teacher. And because I was scared the next day to go to school, I told my parents I was not feeling well.
Good strategy.
And I insisted I was not going to school. That is what memory you brought back.
Mm.
It's crazy, going back in time, but thinking about those people that did not make you feel good in the past.
Hmm.
Sometimes makes you remember like certain things from the past. And yeah, that's what I can tell you. Yeah, I did, remember. But for the positive experience, it just, sparked up, a feeling of joy and peace that I really cannot explain. But I guess it's probably part of the whole process.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then you just do that over and over until when you think about that experience, the negative one, then there's nothing left in it. So it might sound weird, but in a way we change the memory. Of course, you always know what happened. It's not like it didn't happen, but there's no emotional charge. You can't really see it anymore. It kind of just disappears. And then for some, it just flips into something positive. So it was, I don't know, for me, I was like, this makes sense because you started laughing right after we did it. And I asked you about the negative memory because that's what sometimes happens, that then suddenly it's not so traumatic anymore. Suddenly you can laugh about it or, whatever. Maybe you could already laugh about it before. You seem like the kind of guy who could. But yeah, then eventually that negative memory would actually turn and shift and become something positive. And then the reason why we want that is because if you have a positive experience of like loving school and you feel safe and all that, then you will have that inside of you when you go into the world, like in the future, like from now on. So you will no longer respond from that unsafety you were feeling back then. So when you smell grass, you won't feel bad. When you smell grass, you'll feel great. And when you play football on the grass, you will have your perform really well or something instead of feeling unsafe and yeah, whatever it is.
So I noticed something with people in alternative medicine, they tend to tap more into the power of the mind body connection.
Yeah.
So I did have an accident at some point in 2021. I've had to see physios and chiropractors in order to help improve, my well-being.
Mm.
And during the chiropractic sessions, I noticed that one of the like really experienced chiropractors was using the whole mind-body connection thing. When you come in, he tries to create a positive environment. They have this really nice fragrances. they give you different things like sea salt and some other stuff. But what really struck me was they have lots of positive affirmations across their walls in the office, and he will tell you, oh, how do you feel today? Say, I feel good, I am happy, like giving you positive confirmations. Excuse me, sir, I came here so you can adjust my bones and crack my back and make that sound that make me feel good. Like, why are you telling me to say I feel well today, blah blah blah? But then I just followed the whole routine, and I discovered that, wow, in that moment, in that place, I don't know, would I say to some extent, it feels like I don't want to call it, for the lack of a better word, it kind of feels like a scam, like a fraud, because you feel better in that instant. You go home, you feel better, but the next day, the pain is back again. I'm like, what is happening? What is happening, guys?
Yeah.
So I really don't know. So that mind body connection, right? So how does faster EFT tap into the mind body connection to promote healing, especially for chronic conditions like CFS?
Yeah. Well, the whole system is built upon the belief that we are successfully creating the reality we live in, based on what we hold internally. So, if I have chronic fatigue, for instance, it's not like I'm sick. It's not like you could call it sickness, but I'm not. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not broken. I am successfully having chronic fatigue because I have a certain baggage that makes me, um, feel and act and think and believe in a way that ends up with this chronic fatigue syndrome.
Sorry to interrupt you. So are you saying this is more psychological than physiological? That is, it has to do with the mind
Mhm.
rather than the body.
That's my belief. I don't think anything is black and white ever. I think there's always gray areas, but my
Okay.
experience is that, um, with most people who have chronic fatigue, they've already tried eating healthy. They've tried, optimizing their environment around them. They've gone to 20 doctors. Like, they've done everything. They don't stress. All that. It didn't work. That's why they come to me, and then we work on the mind and the emotions, and then they get better, even though nothing in the physical environment changed. But what changed was their perception of the reality that they were in. So they started feeling grateful. They started feeling safe. They started liking themselves. They started loving themselves. They started setting boundaries, saying no, all these things. And of course, there are kind of specific things that usually is the cause of specifically chronic fatigue syndrome. So that's stuff like that I've already mentioned a couple of times, like being a people pleaser, not being able to say no, the type A personality, or if you grew up with your parents feeling, or whoever you grew up with, feeling unsafe. Rejection is also a big part, because if you felt kind of rejected in your childhood, then you are likely to want to kind of try to, get that love by performing, by improving yourself. So that's where the type A personality comes into play, right? So all of this is kind of a reaction to what you experienced. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say.
So my mind body, I'm very, very big on achieving an equilibrium, or can I say a synergy, a handshake between the mind and the body, because for me personally, I believe that when the mind is trained to function optimally, and then the body is also trained to function optimally, you would have a well-rounded individual with optimal well-being. Do you also agree with that philosophy?
Oh, 100%. I guess it's when you say that the mind is trained to work optimally. Like, I think our mind is always working optimally, because if you grow up in an unsafe environment, it's a really, really good thing that you adopted strategies. The thing is, then when you become an adult, you don't have to keep doing it. You can change, because you are not in that unsafe environment anymore. You are safe now. So again, like, it's not that your mind was working in a wrong way or in a bad way or anything. It's just that you had to adapt because of your environment, because of what you were living in. And then the way you adapted also had with it some things you might not like for instance, chronic fatigue, or I don't know, knee problems, or headaches or whatever it is for you.
Wow. So the thing is this, trauma can actually be psychological or physical.
Hmm.
You agree with that, right? It's
I
either
don't really see the body that way, but for the sake of the argument, sure.
okay. So basically, if I did hit you here,
Yeah.
right, that's trauma to your body, right?
Yeah,
And the
but
next time I'm moving my hand in that direction, you probably want to
yeah,
evade it. That's a traumatic response. But
sure, yeah,
also
but
a
that's
heartbreak. A heartbreak from a boyfriend is also, traumatic.
yeah,
And that's why, so some girls, if you approach them, they don't even want to talk to you or something. I'm like, excuse me, I'm not your ex-boyfriend. Just give me some attention, right? And then you see a lot of girls on social media these days say men are this, men are that. I'm like, excuse me, like, what are you saying? Say the men you've experienced are this,
yeah.
not all men, right?
Mm.
And a lot of times, I think both sexes experience this. When you're friendly to the opposite sex, they tend to read wrong meanings to it,
Mm.
right? You're just kind. You probably help a person open a door or give a person assistance, on the street. They feel like, oh, he's, moving to me. So I like to do that a lot. I guess maybe because I'm a kind person, right? So probably if you need some sort of assistance, and I'll just help you and say, "Oh, bye, God bless you." I see that face where the girl will be like, "Are you not going to take my number?" Like, I don't know if I'm going to ever see you again in my life, but I just want to be kind to you. I just like to be kind to people. But then I think there was one time this one lady told me, "Are you not going to take my number?" I'm like, I did not help you because I want your number. I just helped you because, I like to be, you know, a kind person. Oh, wow, so kind of you, blah, 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 right? But, same thing as well, from girls to guys, right? When a girl is being friendly, helps you out with something, you feel like, wow, it's like, okay, this girl is feeling me. But the girl might just be, a kind person. So a lot of us are moving around, walking around with, a lot of emotional traumas,
Mm.
right, from people that we have dealt with in the past. So there are even people who would reject kind gestures because they feel like maybe this person is trying to trick me or this person is trying to manipulate me, right?
Well,
there are people like that. So basically, my argument is if the mind, right, is trained to function optimally, because you can channel your mind into different things. I remember, like, when I was like way younger, I was very poor at mathematics, right? But at some point I met somebody who told me, oh, this thing is principle based, and if you apply yourself to the principles, you can actually get it right. And guess what, I ended up becoming a chartered accountant, crunching numbers for a living, ended up becoming an economist, ended up with, masters in business administration. So I was like, okay, the numbers and numbers and numbers, they're principle based, right? So there is no limits to the power of the mind if you're able to channel it in the right direction, right? And also the body as well. So I grew up as a skinny kid, uh, due to being involved in combat sports and training. I developed a muscular tone, and over time, people ask me, oh, like, is this how you've been? Is your father muscular? I'm like,
well,
you don't inherit muscles. You have to work. You have to work for it. You get the gist, right? So if okay, and then I also noticed at some point that maybe when I focus too much on maybe reading or writing, intellectual activities, right,
mhm,
without physical exercise, I
mm,
discovered that I tend to feel sick
mm,
because it feels like I'm feeding the mind but not feeding the body. I'm training the mind but not training the body.
mm.
So I think I see like a lot of people in this age and time. Some people are gym, enthusiasts. I don't know. They never go out of a gym subscription. They are always, working out and everything. But do they really apply their minds to something? Maybe learning a new trade, maybe doing a new course or something, right? But the guys, the people who tend to obsess over, educational activities, for example, right? Maybe people that are doing a PhD, you get to discover that a lot of them don't take physical exercises very seriously.
Mm.
So it's more like in society, we have people who are training the mind, people that are training the body, but few people who are trying to achieve a sync
Yeah.
between the two.
Yeah, we're somehow, I think, very disconnected from what a healthy, natural life actually is. We live in a society today that's very fake, could be one word to describe it. Like, we live in these boxes with fake lighting and fake food, and we have everything at our fingertips. So it's hard to connect with that natural lifestyle. But I think if we can manage to do it, like both have the physical and the mental aspects involved, then that's where we ultimately feel our best. So somebody like you probably like you realize like you need to feed your body and your mind, otherwise you're not going to feel good. But most of us will. I think we live in. No, I know this. I think I know this for a fact that the majority of us we are not necessarily very self-aware. We don't even know that we're just running on autopilot. I didn't know that either before I was forced to kind of look within and forced to figure out what the hell was going on so that I could get better and get healthier. And that's also a big part of my lifestyle today, I would say. I mean, I'm still in very bad shape. I'm still trying to just get to a regular kind of healthy, muscular, physical state. But it's part of my journey also to kind of go back to the basic and take everything out that's not really health inducing. So, yeah, for instance, like we have red lights at nighttime, and try to eat not food that's not true product. What's the word? Like the food
Processed?
Yeah, processed, yes. Food that's not too processed and so on. But the majority of people doesn't really seem to be focused on these things. I think the majority of people just kind of go with what society kind of has set up for them or what their family has set up for them. And I think that's also why because we don't have that self-awareness. I mean, it's understandable that we don't, because like our world is changing so fast. So it is a weird situation we suddenly put in, where everything is so different than it was just 100 or 200 years ago. So just biologically, we still work like we used to, but then we are put in this completely different scenario. So I also think that's why a lot of the issues kind of arises.
So I totally agree with you on the autopilot narrative, right? Because when I try to think about, what really made me take physical exercises more seriously, was because I got involved in a car accident at some point in 2021, and I had to see physios, and then they start telling you, oh, you need to do these kind of stretches, you need to do these kind of exercises which help you feel better. And also, I did get to, coming into the United Kingdom, I did get to meet people from diverse parts of the world, and I was lucky to meet people that take exercises very seriously. And being a numbers guy myself, I discovered you don't just exercise, you need to be able to track the numbers, the variables in the exercises. And that was the only reason that made me get an Apple Watch. So I'm the natural kind of person. I don't like jewelry. I don't wear chains. I don't wear any other thing. But I had to like bring myself to wear the watch in order to be able to track the fitness variable, right?
Yeah.
So basically, tracking those fitness variables makes you more self-aware about your exercise routine, your fitness routine, your fitness goals. Are you achieving them? Where do you compare in terms of the actual versus the desired, right? So
Mm,
basically, people tend to run on autopilot until you get to come in contact with a disruptor.
yeah.
So for me, that accident was a disruptor. Without the accident, I wouldn't have had the need to get to meet with physios, with chiropractors that'll be telling you, oh, you need to take exercising more seriously, right? I might not have met with a certain, there's this, I don't know what they're cold, but maybe like a diet and nutrition specialist who tells you these particular kind of foods are not good for you, these kind of foods are good for you, blah blah blah, right? Some people are very cool eating junk because it has worked for them all their lives until you get to meet a disruptor or maybe encounter some health challenge that will make you have to meet with these people, and then they tell you this is what is good, that is what is bad. Or until you meet a disruptor, you don't get to change the flow of that autopilot. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's such a shame why we don't just change, because we can see that this way is obviously better, but like I didn't either. I also had to get really bad. I don't really know why it is that way, but it just
Or
seems
you're
to be the
forced
way
to
to work.
sometimes. It's like the universe forces you in the right direction sometimes.
Exactly. And I think it's really beautiful in a way that, like, even in these really extremely kind of, like, the situation that seems extremely difficult or challenging or filled with a lot of emotions that doesn't feel good, then actually they can be the greatest catalysts or the greatest teachers. And they can actually be really, really great experiences. It's kind of how I try to live my life, having learned how to, use my mind and create an environment that supports me in getting better and reaching my goals. I try to like see the positive in every experience, but it's not in the way that let's suppress whatever is negative there, because that doesn't work either. But I really try to, when I see a challenge, I really try to take responsibility for it and say, okay, so like, what can I do about this? How can I change it? Or how can I feel different? Or do I need to do something different? How can I turn this into something good? Like, for instance, having a baby, I've been very overwhelmed because I live in a country and I don't have my family to help me out. And I could have just kept being annoyed about it and I can't get the help I need and blah, blah, blah. But then I was like, okay, so what would be a creative solution to this? So we got a cleaning lady in to help me clean, because that's one way I can get support. So it's just a silly example, right? But I try really to do that with everything in my life so I can keep growing and learning from life, and it keeps getting better all the time. So I don't have to run into those really big, difficult situations that none of us really want to be in.
So, when you have a session with your clients, what's the typical routine?
In the session or with their journey? I
No,
mean, the actual session?
in yeah, I
Yeah.
think a typical session. So you could just describe how you probably, I don't know how, what you do. Do you diagnose, you psychoanalyze from start to,
Yeah.
I don't want to say start to
Um,
finish, but
yeah.
for the lack of a better narrative.
So everybody that is educated in the FasterEFT eutaptic style that I am educated in would start out with mapping out the patterns behind. So like what I did with you, saying, okay, it's the school experience, it's because you were hit, and then I would keep asking questions and mapping everything out. So that's the first part of the session. And then the second part of the session is where we actually make the changes. And I think that's where it differs from like a regular like psychologist you would visit, that we don't just talk
Therapy.
about the issue, because talking doesn't always help. Some people have gone to psychologists for 10 years and they still
Hmm.
have the issues, right? So it didn't help. Of course, sometimes it's great. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying if you keep talking about the same issue and nothing is changing, then maybe try something different. So the second part of the session is where we do the tapping that I guided you through. And I, have specific techniques I can use and so on. But what you would experience is mostly just the tapping, and then I would drizzle, is that a word? I would put in different kind of techniques that you might not even notice to help get these big changes. And then in the end of the session, they might have 5 memories that used to be traumatic that now are positive memories. And then the homework would be, I ask you to practice those at home, meaning just think about them, because we want the brain to start working differently. We want the brain to start referring to these positive memories filled with safety and relaxation and happiness and so on, instead of going back to the memories with the trauma that were creating the chronic fatigue. Um,
Oh,
yeah.
that's really really interesting. Uh, okay, I'm back from our commercial break. So you mentioned a tap along group in your bio on Instagram. So what's the idea behind this, and how has the community support played a role in healing?
So this is a brand new thing that I'm starting up now. Because I have a baby, so I just have less time than I had before. But I still really want to help people. So in order to help more people in less time, I decided to
Oh,
start up this tag-along group. And I've only done like one group so far, but I'm gonna start it up, so it's gonna run bi-weekly. And I think it's a really, really great way to also help people help themselves. Because a big part of why, like, I see often that people come to me, they work with me, and then they get a lot better, but then they stop working with me and they get worse again.
oh.
And
So
and
they become dependent. You more like like a drug.
well, it's like if they don't learn to actually take responsibility for what's going on inside of them. I also do have a lot of really amazing clients that are just so committed to learning this, and he's watching me, who is so committed to this learning and changing their inner world. But it can be tough, and if you think you can just kind of like a psychology session, if you think it's like that, you show up for 1 hour and then you go home and that's it, you're not going to get the full benefits from it. You do have to have a certain level of commitment. And I think those tap along groups can really help people to realize, like, okay, I can do this myself. They can get support in doing it themselves. And then, of course, they can also add in all the one-on-one sessions they need, but from somebody else.
This thing you said actually reminds me of when I started seeing a physio here in England. And yeah, I go to the physio, we do our session, feel good for maybe the rest of the day, and the next day you're back to the pains. But I remember the physios usually give you a homework, and the homework would be certain stretches. So, but then I just felt like the stretches are ridiculous because I was more like, just give me medicine that's going to take off this pain. But then they say, you need to practice the stretches at home. So, whenever you have your next session, they ask, did you do the stretches? And then I'm like, it's shame. I did it only once. And then they say, oh, you're not helping yourself. You need to do the stretches, blah, 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 blah. And when they touch your body, they know you did not do the stretches.
Yeah.
There was one that he touched my back. I was like, "You've not been doing your stretches." I'm like, "How did you know?" He said, "I can tell. It's still stiff." And then I said, "Okay, I'll try." And then there was this one time, I did the stretches every day. I did not miss, a session. Did my exercises, and the next time I got back, the guy touched my body. And then it was like, yeah, there's improvement. It's like you've been doing your stretches. I was like, yeah, I did it this time. So I don't know, the methodology behind faster EFT, but does it kind of work that way in which if you don't like continue with certain routine, you probably fall back to your previous state?
I mean, to a certain extent, it depends on who you are because we all work differently. I have had like clients who just had a few sessions and then they were dramatically better and I didn't really need any follow up. But the majority of us, we're very used to working the same way, especially people with chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue people are very, very often overthinkers, and overthinkers are the most difficult clients to work with because they
Mm-hmm.
are so used to thinking a certain way that you have to work so hard to help them think a different way. And if they're not on board with practicing this at home, it's likely gonna maybe not shift entirely back to how it used to be, but at least like have a little bit of a relapse afterwards. Yeah.
There's a song in Nigeria by a Nigerian musician. He says, "Overthinking no dey solve problem. Better days are coming." So it takes people time to realize that overthinking, actually does not solve problems.
Yeah, but it can be really difficult. If you have chronic fatigue, then you might have lost your entire life. You might not even be able to get out of bed. You might not be able to meet anybody, watch a movie, anything. So what are you going to think about besides the fact that you feel like shit? But if you spend 12 hours a day thinking and feeling like shit, thinking about all these symptoms, how much you hate it, how terrible your life is, and you do that for 5 years, those patterns are going to be really strong in your mind. And you're going to be
Sounds
really, really
miserable.
convinced you're sick. and you're broken and something is wrong with you and you have no energy and you can't get better. Like, all my clients basically start off with saying, but you actually think this can work for me? Like, I just don't really believe it. Of course you don't believe it because you've been thinking that way for so many years. I didn't believe it either.
So you can always be that example, the shining light. Okay, I did not believe it myself until
Yeah.
it worked for me. I think it's just natural for a lot of people not to believe in the effectiveness of alternative medicine. I've spoken with quite a number of people about alternative medicine methods, techniques, even something that is now becoming as mainstream as chiropractors. A lot of people do not want to see chiropractors.
Yeah.
So alternative medicine I think, is struggling to achieve mainstream acceptance, if you would say so. So the community does help to keep people active, keep people engaged, keep people involved in their path to growth, right?
That's the dream, the goal. To be honest, I'm just starting it up, but that's what I'm dreaming into my reality for the future.
So if you are willing to share,
Mhm.
what would you see is probably one of the most inspiring success stories from your clients that has stuck with you?
I mean, of course, everything is anonymous and confidential, but I can give some examples. I think that, of course, the stories with quick recoveries are the ones you like the most. I mean, I've had clients that have pretty much healed completely in 10 sessions from severe chronic fatigue. I had one client who,
Sessions.
yeah. I mean, to me, it's just so normal by now, so I'm not even like wowed by it anymore. But it is kind of insane because, if you ask a doctor, they will say you need to learn to manage your symptoms or to live with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I think, obviously, but yeah. So those are
Doctors don't be annoying. I don't know if it's probably part of their training to deliver bad news to people without even blinking an eye
oh,
and staying there with a straight face.
when people come, like when I have a session with people, a session is usually only a good session if they cry. They cry a lot in the session, and I'm there sitting there trying to make them cry, trying to make them feel awful. So it's a very interesting profession to have.
But why? Like, a person doesn't necessarily need to cry for them to express their deepest emotions.
But I work with women, so
Well, I see.
I mean,
I, I'm not a
everybody's
woman.
different, right?
I cannot tell, but I know different strokes for different folks, right? Because I've personally been through things where I wish I could cry, but the tears are not even coming out.
Well, that's
So
also part of FasterEFT. Like, we are all individual. So I'm individual. Yeah, we all different. So I'm also trained to change the session based on who I'm working with.
exactly, and different individuals are, do I say, different per time. So
Yeah.
would I say, for example, the version of me from 5 years ago is not the same version of me today. So people sort of change over time
Yeah.
and in different conditions, different circumstances. So my mood today is not the same mood I had yesterday. It's not the same mood I'm going to have tomorrow because there are always so many moving variables, right? And I think maybe for women as well, the fact that they have more hormones that would I say regulate or influence their bodies is going to be different. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that's it. Because if you have a woman who is not pregnant today and she's pregnant, next month, the
Mm.
way she might react or respond to certain things would be different, right? Because
Oh
you
yeah,
have
sure.
new hormones in that
Yeah,
body system. So
100%.
talking about breaking the stigmas, and hot topics. So chronic illnesses like CFS
Mhm.
are often misunderstood or dismissed. So what misconceptions do you think people have, and how can we shift the narrative?
Well, the most common one is believing that it's all in your head. you're depressed or you just need to pull yourself together. You're not actually sick. I think a lot of the friends I had back then, they didn't understand what the hell was going on with me, because from the outside it's like, okay, there's not actually anything wrong with you, but you just don't feel good. Just get out there. I mean, I remember my grandmother. She was visiting, and she's the sweetest grandmother ever. But she just wanted me to join the walk we were all having because she thought it would be so good for me. And I ended up doing it, and I felt terrible afterwards. And I kind of crashed a little bit. And she was like, "Oh, don't it just feel so good?" And I was like, "No, it doesn't feel good. I just went way beyond my limits." So that's a very weird thing, because for normal people, exercising or doing things that are like healthy would be a good thing. But for people with chronic fatigue or ME, that's what makes you crash. And that can be really hard to wrap your mind around, that it's actually also a physical thing, not just a mental thing, because it starts in the brain. Like, I believe it starts in the brain. Of course, I'm not a doctor. But it's also physical, It's not that, oh, it's just in your brain or in your mind. No, that's where it started, but you do have actual physical symptoms.
So, in terms of people that are being misunderstood, what's your word to them? Because we understand that you have said it's mental to a very large extent, and it being mental transforms to affecting individuals physically. Is that correct?
Yes, the physical body responds to your inner environment. Yes.
So,
well, I would tell people to stop engaging in groups that are telling you that you have a chronic disease, or teach you how to manage your symptoms. Stop going to doctors. Of course, if you think you need to go to a doctor, go to a doctor. But stop trying to find the answers in group settings or with people that don't believe you can get better. Start engaging with people that believe you can recover. Start listening to testimonials of people who have already done it. Surround yourself with the type of person that can you get it? Still delivering, baby.
I did pause, but we're back.
Okay. To just start engage with people that believe in you and believe in the possibility that you can fully recover, and that maybe they've done it themselves, or they are on the journey themselves, but and stop engaging with the people that don't believe it.
That is actually well said. So, with mental health awareness on the rise, what do you think still needs to change in how society views anxiety and burnout?
I wanted to say everything. Like, it's just so normalized. Like, I remember in high school when I was severely stressed and I was shaking and I had headaches every day. My neck was hurting every day. I was getting more and more tired. And I was telling my mom that, I'm just so stressed. Her response was, "No, you're not stressed. You just have a lot to do." Because she just didn't understand how bad it was for me. And it's so normal that everybody feels this way. And it's not to say that it's not serious, but we just have such a seriously sick society. And my mom is amazing, by the way. She didn't mean anything by it. But it's just, I remember there was some sort of, they made like what is it called? Like they asked a bunch of teenagers in Denmark about their mental health. And it was something like 1/3 was severely stressed. Like, that is insane. I mean, the number might even have been bigger.
That's 33.3%.
That is 33.3%.
Wow. 0.33333 stressed. Oh, wow. That's massive. That's not good. That's
Yeah.
not good.
No, so I think like it's such a big.
Just to bring it into context for people who are not numbers people, it means if you randomly pick 3 teenagers, on the streets in Denmark, it means you will likely see one that is stressed out of.
Yeah, and I think the other one would be like medium stressed. It's not like
partially.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So
we're living in the hard times.
We do. Like, I'm also being on this journey. I have changed so much. I was very much like the regular Danish citizen, like a teenage girl growing up. You go to kindergarten, then you go to school, then you get a job, then you do all those things. And now, because I've learned all this, I'm gonna homeschool my kid. He's not gonna go to kindergarten. and that's because I've learned so much about how we work and what kind of environments are healthy for us and what kind of environments are not healthy for us. And I don't want to put him in an environment that he has to heal from afterwards, which I think school is.
Okay, so kindergarten, I understand, I accept that. How about, I don't know what the educational system is like in Denmark, but you now reside in Poland, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I think pretty much what I always associate with Denmark is Danish cookies and Danish pastries.
Okay,
Yeah, Danish cookies are really, really tasty.
they are.
The pastries from Denmark, you guys have good pastry. So growing up, there was this, cookie we used to eat in Nigeria. It's like in a round metal bowl. It's called Danish cookies. It's kind of like, uh,
I'm not sure what it is.
it tastes, I think the taste is probably closest to shortbread. Think about a shortbread with a more buttery flavor,
Oh yeah, I think maybe I
soft.
know. Yeah, I think I
Yeah,
know.
yeah, like that. Really nice. But aside from that, I don't know what the education is like in Denmark. So, do you guys have what you call the primary school, secondary school?
I'm not sure what the English translation would be, but we have like the primary school from, we call it grade 0 to grade 9 that you have to do. And then you can choose if you do 10th grade as well. And then after that, you have 3 years of high school that you can choose to do or not.
Okay, so are you saying that your child would not go to the regular educational institutions for like their high school, primary school, or something like? At what point does the homeschooling stop?
Yeah. So, of course, when he reaches a certain age, he will be free to decide for himself and he might choose differently. But I'm not going to send him to kindergarten. And when he's going to be younger, I'm not there yet. But now I don't believe that I'm going to send him to school, even in the first 5 years or something, even if he wants to. He's not going to get allowed because I just know what it does to somebody long term to be in an environment like that. Then after that, if he really, really wants to, I guess he can go. So kind of age appropriate, like when is it appropriate that he can make a decision like that himself? Then of course he's allowed to. I don't think like the Danish system is awful at all. Like I think we have pretty great educational system compared to other countries. But like the idea that, again, this is such a huge topic, but the idea that we take kids, like Denmark is the country in the world that institutionalized the kids the earliest and the most. So the idea in Denmark is that it's healthy for kids. A 1-year-old kid is healthy to be sent to institutions like kindergarten. That's the healthy thing. If you don't do it, then you're not taking good care of your kid. It's healthy for the kid to be away from his parents 8 hours a day. Like, obviously it's not. Like, it should be logical. And I know that there's not any ill intent from any parents in Denmark. It's also because you have to work, right? But the idea that we think this is actually healthy for a little child, it's so weird to me.
But can I play the devil's advocate
Of
on
course.
this particular issue? So there are courses I did I studied economics for my first degree. I did courses in psychology, sociology. And I remember something from sociology. They say man is a social animal, right? And
Yeah.
sociology is the study of man, in man's social interactions, man in social setting, right? Because social sciences basically is around studying, the behavior of human beings. So for psychology, for example, it's the human mind. Now, man is actually a social animal, whether we like it or not. Just
Mm.
like you have ants, for example, ants are social animals. They have a hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
And in order for a social animal to develop, properly, to have, a well-rounded development, they need to learn how to interact with other individuals of their species, right? In different settings,
Yeah.
right? They need to understand social cues. They need to understand appropriate social interactions. And I feel like, the early school system helps, children to be able to learn the fundamentals from a very, very early age. So imagine, isolating a child, right? I don't think that child will properly respond to social interactions from other children or from other individuals. So we have different social institutions. You have, religious institutions, for example. You have the media, if that's another social institution. You have the family, that's a social institution. You have educational institutions. You have political institutions. They're just different social institutions that you have. But the educational institution, right, I'm of the opinion that it's not a very good idea to deny children the opportunity to participate in that system. Instead, we should try to find a way to mitigate the risks that are associated with that system. So, for example, in the educational system, you have bad teachers, for example, you have bullies, for example. So it's more like the responsibility of a parent to check in, do that regular check in, right? You have parents, teachers, interactions, try to be active, with these things, know who these individuals, that are teaching your kids are, right? Try to be more involved in the school activities that involves parents because really there are a lot of creepy individuals who find themselves, into these social institutions and do terrible things to kids. But what is actually the percentage of these individuals? What's the percentage of occurrence? So because we probably have, I don't know the numbers right now, right? So let's say, for example, because we have like a 5% occurrence, right, of risk or safeguarding issues with kids, it now becomes a scare, a fear for us not to send our children to these institutions. Me personally, I don't buy that idea. I don't know, maybe because I'm not a parent or because I'm just doing research from a neutral standpoint. But I respect, the opinions of people like yourself who do not like the idea of sending children to, these institutions because it comes at a risk in life and in business. We have different risk perspectives. So some people are risk lovers, some people are risk neutrals, and some people are risk adverse. They don't like to take risks at all. But I would like to think of myself as a risk neutral. We try to balance it. Let's not take too much risk and let's not take too little risk, right? But it's always worth trying. That is from me. I'm not trying to convince you
No,
to
that's
do
no.
otherwise, but that's the opposite side's
I
argument.
I would love to comment on that. I'm just gonna mention now that like I heard my baby cry a lot. If he seems quiet now, but I just got so stressed because I'm not usually my husband has him, but if he starts crying more, I want to go to him. No, but for me, it's not about fearing like that there's any teachers or any specific person that's going to traumatize him for life or something. It's not about that at all. It's about the idea that you have to sit down and you're forced to learn something that other people have decided 8 hours a day. That's not. I don't believe that's healthy, and I don't believe it's healthy either. Or it's not that it's necessarily super unhealthy, but I don't believe it's the healthiest thing either to be forced to socialize with 24 other kids at exactly your age for 8 hours a day. Like I don't think that's the natural healthy way of socializing. So I fully intend to my kids to be around other people all the time around us, and we're going to go to social gatherings. Maybe I'm going to find groups in the area. I'd also love to look into something like a forest school where maybe he could be some hours a day. But I don't buy into the idea that the healthy thing for him is to be apart from his family, apart from me, for 8 hours a day, especially when he's young, and that he's going to be forced to sit through lessons that might not make much sense to him. Then I would much rather support him in learning things that he's super excited about. Because we also know that you learn way better through play and that flow state. So if you can incorporate that way more, then he might actually be also educationally like smarter. I know that universities like Harvard and these top universities in the United States, they actually take in a lot of homeschool kids because they know that these kids are motivated. They are there because they truly love what they are doing and they know how to self-study because they've been doing that their whole lives. So it's not because I want to just not risk any specific situation. It's more the whole system that I don't agree with, and I think the system should be more supportive of the child's general well-being instead of just focus on forcing them to learn this specific thing that everybody has to learn. if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. So I really don't know what the system over there is, right? I live in England, but what I hear from a couple of colleagues who have kids is that in the early years classes, they tend to encourage learning by play. But I can't say authoritatively that this is what is happening because I'm not yet a parent, so I don't like to misinform people. But from what I have, from the interactions I've had, with my friends, with my colleagues who actually have kids, so the feedback I get is that they tend to incorporate more of play. Like
Yeah.
where I come from,
Yeah.
Nigeria, I think they're more like academic
Yeah.
in nature. They try to ensure that the kids actually achieve certain uh, uh, academic programs, right? At certain levels, at each levels. So it's more enforced. So I don't know what the system right now in Nigeria is as well, because the educational system, the educational landscape keeps changing, and of course the curriculum also keeps changing over time. But when I was a student back then, it was more of the old school methods,
Yeah.
right? Ensuring that you know A, B, C, D, E, F in a particular curriculum before you can move to another class, and you have to have satisfied the requirements of the curriculum before you are allowed to progress. And if you do not satisfy the requirements, that is, if you don't pass the examinations, you would be made to repeat the class until you show that you're able to pass, all of the requirements. So different people have different learning paces. I have been privileged to be a teacher, a lecturer myself, but would I say maybe also unfortunate not to have ever taught little kids. So I was more involved in adult education. I used to,
Yeah.
lecture financial reporting, corporate reporting, financial accounting. But what I learned is, me being a teacher of the adults is like I was taking the baton from the early years and, high school teachers. So these adults are already formed. They are stuck in their ways, sort of. So it's more like you're trying to make an enhancement on a building that has been built. And they say, why is it called a building when it's already built? Because and the answer I give is because, there's never a perfect building. You can always have an enhancement on a building. So for the adults, right, I discover a lot of people have certain, beliefs, certain knowledge, certain vocabulary. It says like a reservoir. So I now had to develop methods in order to be able to ensure that these people from different, backgrounds are able to understand the message that I have for them, are able to understand, the the concepts that I'm trying to teach them in the least amount of time possible. Because you're probably teaching, say, like 50 adults a particular concept, and people have different learning styles and people have different learning paces. So I discovered when I relate it to real life examples and funny scenarios, people tend to learn faster. So same thing, play is still a part of the learning process for adults as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get the gist, right? So it now depends on how these people are able to adopt methodologies. But I don't know. I have not been privileged to be a part of the educational system, especially for the growing kids, right? So I think instead of us, trying to shy away from having our children being involved, we can possibly make contributions. Because I know a friend of mine told me you would make a really good school governor. And it's something that I would look into at some point, make contributions into how can the schools develop, right? And how can we develop better programs for these children?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think it's my responsibility to improve a system that I don't agree with in the first place with my child, So if you're an adult, if you're an adult, I think it's completely different because then you're choosing based on your interest or based on what you want to do. But it's more like the primary school where you're forced to learn all these things that you might not want to.
But in the end, you went to these schools, right?
Yeah.
And what would you say have been the merits and demerits, that is, the advantages and disadvantages of you going through the formal educational process?
Well, I think actually I would have been better at both math and Danish if I hadn't gone to school. Because before I started school, I really, really loved these two topics. And it was just so boring for me. I was always like in the top of my class. And it was so boring because either you learned things you didn't really want to learn,
It's trying
or
to learn from us.
he's a bit tired, tired and hungry. Of course, I got a lot of things out of it as well. Like my time in school was not traumatic at all. It's just I think the world would be a better place if we changed the system and it was more um, yeah, based on our interest and what we wanted to do instead of you have to do this.
I think a lot of us tend to criticize the educational system, even though we've sort of had certain benefits from it. I remember a friend of mine who went to university with me. She was asking me a funny question. She was like, "Oh, what was the essence of all of the crap we learned in school when we're not even using it today?"
Yeah, I'm not using much of what I learned, right? I didn't even have to go to high school to do what I do today.
Then it really got me thinking, like, okay, what was the essence of learning all of those things?
Yeah.